Giddy up there, you, Mac. Giddy up, Bessie. Concern you for a pair of busted-down, wall-eyed, spavine, ignorantipedes? Getting so a man can't even get 10 winks on his own chuck wagon without you buzzard baits clowning up.
Old Laramee curled 20 feet of whip into a powerful pop about their ears, and the pair of swaybacks began to pull once more. The chuck wagon clattered and rolled over the last small hump and started down the curving, treacherous trail which led into and through Daly Canyon. A horse is often wiser than a preoccupied man, and Bessie or Mac might have had something to say if they could talk, for 2 wagons wouldn't pass on this narrow trail. They let the whip pop away their caution, and downward they shuffled. Old Laramee had not liked being disturbed. It was just about dusk, and shortly he would be elbow deep in the onerous duties of the cook of the Lazy G. When the horses had shied and stopped, he'd been halfway through a little book titled The Secret of Power, a 25-lesson course in the occult sciences, giving the student positive control of his fellow men. That was for Laramee, by gad. By gad, if he didn't get some control over something pretty soon, he was going to turn digger engine complete with a breech clout and let 'em all go to the devil. For ever since Lee Jacoby had come on as foreman to the Lazy G, the life of old Laramee had been worth less than a second-hand chaw of old mule.
Hey, you Cookie!
Lee Jacoby would howl.
You call this chuck or you make it to shoe horses with?
Or,
my God, Cookie, I didn't know you was an expert on mixing poisons. Boys, we ain't got a cook, we got an apothecary. Throw down and give me some ham and eggs.
Yeah, it was the quality of the wit which injured. For as an old-time chef of the cow camps, Laramee was not unused to joshing, but ye gods, it ought to at least be funny. And it never, never, never ought to be followed up with dumping perfectly good food on the ground. The punchers of the Lazy G followed the leader. They weren't the old crowd. Ever since the kid's pa got killed in Laredo, old hands had been drifting. First came Lee Jacoby with his cock-of-the-walk brutality, and then followed Rannies who better suited the foreman's taste. They never consulted the kid. Young Tom Gregory had lost his mother when he was born, and his old man when he was 9. And now at 10, he was the owner, in title only. The Crawford County Bank, meaning old Nan Williamson, actually running the spread. It was all legal enough, but things were happening. One of these days, the kid would have to drift, penniless, and old Laramee was trying hard to stand by.
Ah, cracky,
sighed old Laramee, with his thumb in the book and his eyes vacant.
If I could do just 1/16 what this Hindu fella says I can, I could run Lee Jacoby plumb off the range. And Williamson to boot.
He looked back into the book and read a moment, and then growled with determination.
And the Bolger twins likewise.
Wrapped in his glorious dream, he didn't even begin to hear what was happening ahead. He drew an imaginary gun from an imaginary holster and said to the imaginary Gus Bolger, the same that had shot the kid's paw,
"You're powerless. With the magic wave of my left paw, I create you a statue. With a quick summon of my right, I create you a corpse."
But it wasn't old Laramee's imaginary gun. It was a real, honest-to-gosh shooting iron. And Bessie and Mac recognized it as such. They reared against the remorseless weight of the unbraked wagon, got shoved ahead, reared again, and then bronc fashion, scared to death, lit out like the cannonball stage straight down the curving road. Whoever it was that had shot was not in sight. The road's curve hit him. But the speed with which old Laramee was traveling would very shortly remedy that. His old slouch hat whipped back in the hurricane, and the chin thong nearly strangled him. He tried to grind home the brake shoe, but he missed and had to use both hands and both feet to hold on. The reins were loosely tied to the brake, and to reach them was impossible. And he couldn't reach his rabbit's foot, and his little Jim Dandy guaranteed lucky ring was carelessly left in the camp. Old Larimee, once upon a time, had been as tough as the next one. But 3 bullet holes, a sense of defeat, and old age had ended that. He screamed like a wounded mountain lion, and the scenery blurred by. The chuck wagon finished the curve on 2 wheels, and then swapped to the other 2, came back, and tried to lean over the 100-foot drop into the dry stream bed. Straight ahead were 6 pack animals, clinging to the cliff beside the road, as only burros can do. Directly in the track of the plunging wagon were 2 mounted men holding guns on somebody or something out of old Larimee's view. But the horsemen weren't there long. They gave a white-eyed look at the commoting wagon and dug spur. Their outraged mounts reared and fought to break away down the road in an uncontrolled run. The riders were out of sight and still going an instant later when Mac, tangling with a side-swiped burro, upset the chuck wagon entire. Flat and loud in the middle of the road, old Larimee floated to an easy landing in sand and sagebrush. The sound of breaking crockery gradually ceased to echo in the surrounding arroyos. The dust dropped slowly down in the dusk. Old Larimee spat, sat up, felt of his bones, and then swore luridly and long.
Dang, what the hell is going on? I can't get it's dust.
That seemed to relieve him somewhat, and he looked at his horses. They were bruised, but had struggled to their feet with no bones broken. The chuck wagon, however, had spilled everything from frying pans to cockroaches.
Ah, gracias, gracias.
Wailed somebody.
Gracias, amigo. Gracias infinitos por todos.
Old Larimee understood very little Spanish, but he knew he was being thanked, and he turned to find a small, fat Indian from over the line waddling up, bowing and advancing. 3 small children now rose wide-eyed from the brush, and a woman, as fat as her man, came off a rock above the trail carrying a 4th child. It was a very strange thing, thought old Larimee. Sure, these Mexican Indians didn't seem to be very good bait for outlaws. The flood of Spanish went on with much flinging of arms, and when it seemed that he was about to get kissed, Larimee got gruff.
Yeah, quit, please. It wasn't nothing. Not a thing. Give me a hand with this here wagon.
They gave him a hand. The 3 kids picked up groceries and pans while the man and his wife aided to rig a block and tackle to right the wagon. It was quite dark when the task was done, and Larimee, less breakage, was ready to proceed on his way. He was getting mighty anxious when he thought of how Lee Jacoby would take this, for he should have been at Camp 7 something before supper time. The little Indian was jabbering with more thanks.
Come on, quit it. I'd have done it for anybody. But just now, I gotta go.
Señor, su pago.
I'll go yourself. But I gotta go. I'm gonna be roasted, clothes, hoofs, and hide as it is.
The Indian was pulling forth a fat sack. From it, he poured a small torrent of silver and gold coins. Larimee's eyes popped. So that was the bait. He found that he was about to be paid. This unsettled him.
Dang it, you ornery little cactus eater. I didn't do you no favor on purpose. My horse has run away and I had to do something.
The Indian tried to push the money at him, but he finally succeeded in pushing it back. There was an immediate conference between the Mexican and his wife, and finally, the man went to the sad little burros and dug into a pack. Thing which he now extended to Larimee glittered in the starlight, and the man made a valiant attempt at English.
See, this thing, Látigo, make big man, muy fuerte man. Látigo, he take. Big man make, muy fuerte. Me not Indian, me Aztec. You sabe? You keep, you big man. Mucho lucky, mucho.
Puzzled, Larimee took the object and found it to be a silver-mounted quirt. He was too anxious to get to Camp 7 to delay, and so, saluting with the quirt, hastily he got started before the thanks began again. Mac and Bessie picked their way amongst the rocks of the canyon and soon came out on the flat where, in the distance, a fire marked the whereabouts of Camp 7. Larimee drew up beside the blaze and found Lee Jacoby standing there, eyeing him with his usual evil glare and perhaps something more. Without palaver, Larimee got down, threw back the back of the wagon open, and hurriedly began to throw cold beans and sow-belly in the direction of the blaze. Working so fast he was nearly a blur, he had supper ready in tin plates in less than 15 minutes. With an occasional grin and a jibe, the punchers jostled each other past and, carrying their handouts and coffee mugs to nearby stones, soon ended the meal. All this time, Lee Jacoby had said nothing. The silence was worse than a tongue lashing, and when Larimee had handed the big black-eyed devil his chucked, the old cook shuddered. But still, Lee Jacoby said nothing. Later, when he was cleaning up, Larimee ruminated upon it uncomfortably, and the kid, coming up,
Larimee.
Had to speak twice before Larimee heard him.
Larimee.
Oh, hello, kid.
He stopped and looked closely at the youngster. It was plain, even by the fitful firelight, that the kid had been crying.
What's up, kid?
Not Larimee.
Working too hard, maybe?
Nah. Hell, it'd be a relief to work. I just read out to see things they're doing here.
Somebody dress you down, maybe?
Nah. What do I care about these big stiffs?
Well, maybe the bank, huh?
The kid was silent and quickly changed the subject.
That rook sure was welcome, Larimee. Ever since Sing Lee quit at the main ranch, I just about starved to death.
Sing Lee? Come on now, kid. Why would he quit? By jumping sassafras, somebody's done something to
Nah,
make...
Larimee. It just had to be that way. That's all. Williamson said a private cook for the owner might have been all right when my pa was alive, but it's silly paying a chink just to feed one boy. It's the beginning and the end, Larimee, with stock disappearing.
Wait, listen, kid. I've been out in the camps for these 3 weeks now, and today I was out of grub and had to go into Crawford, and that's the nearest to news I've been in a month. Why in the name of Beelzebub didn't you tell Williamson to go to hell? Well, if I'd have been there, I'd have taken care...
But he broke it off, suddenly ashamed. If he'd been there, he would have done nothing. It was hell to have your nerve gone. There had been a time when he hadn't been old Larimee. Young Larimee had been a gentleman to walk soft around, but that was before Bill Thompson. If he'd been there, he wouldn't have done a thing. He got back to his dishes, the water raw and stinging on the scar of his gun hand. The kid started to dry the dishes with a flour sack.
Them damn Bulger twins rode through about an hour back.
He said, conversationally.
Seemed like they were in a hurry. Horses all leathered.
By the eternal. By the eternal! Them's who it was!
And he promptly told the kid in confidence what had happened back in Daly Canyon. Nearly finished, he reached into the wagon and he pulled out the quirt.
Say, that's football!
And he turned it around in his hands.
What'd he say?
Well, he said, hell, I never could get a hang of that spick-gubbity stuff. He said he was Aztec and that this here thing would make me a big man.
Aztec! Say, Larimee, there's an Aztec priest lives over by Blue Butte.
Yeah?
Regular medicine man he is. Cave full of bats and stone eyes. I've been over there 6, 7 times, but I never had the nerve to go right up to the place. But one day, nobody was home, and I rode up close and peeked in and said, "It make your blood run cold." Stone eyes, big green eyes. I bet he meant human sacrifices and everything.
Larimee looked wonderingly at the kid, and then at the quirt. For the first time, he saw the design. The handle consisted of a coiled serpent whose head was at the top, and 2 great green eyes stared back at him. Suddenly, he felt bewitched, and he thrust the gift from him.
You're lucky he didn't put no spell on you. I almost jumped out of the window when the old Aztec came up to the door. He says he was a devil with an evil eye. If I were you, I'd put that away mighty carefully. There's no telling what it might be.
Half hypnotized by the green-eyed serpent, old Larimee shoved it out of sight. He knew not quite where in the darkness. He had not the benefit any more than the unlettered kid of a higher education, which sternly forbade superstition. And besides, that snake was enough to give the creeps to anybody. The fire burned low, and the punchers took to their bedrolls, and old Larimee soon slept between the wagon wheels, wondering about what would happen to the kid, wondering about why Lee Jacoby hadn't jumped him, and then tangling all in a series of dreams which culminated in a nightmare so horrible that it brought him stifled out of his blankets, pawing for foes, every hair erect on his head. The fire was out, and the night was still. A coyote answered another coyote, and then a wolf with a low, quavering moan silenced all the lesser beasts. The moon cast a sickly light across the plains. It was still. It was lonely. Old Larimee's heart quieted down, and he sank back. But the bed was uncommonly uncomfortable, and he twisted about for minutes before he finally investigated. It was the quirt. He had shoved it into his blankets in error, and on retiring had mistaken it for a rock. He whipped it out, and it glittered in the moonlight, the two green eyes glaring at him.
Make big man,
the little Indian had said. Old Larimee scowled. But it was a funny thing about the quirt. It didn't seem to be so unfriendly now. As he looked at it, a quietness stole over him. Supposing, he sighed as he lay back and covered his head, supposing that was really true. Supposing that just by owning this quirt, a man got to be big and powerful. Oh, well, that was a comfortable thought. Suddenly he sat upright and worked his blanket toward the tailboard. He reached up with a knowing hand and brought down one of his books. He thumbed the pages in the unsteady light of a match.
But amongst all other magical religions, that of the Aztec was the most powerful, according to record. Those tribes which lived in Arizona and New Mexico at the time of the Spaniards' coming were found to be in possession of much black magic, accounts of which have come fragmentarily to us from the early explorers. It is said that some of these Aztec priests could produce howling storms at will, and it was in one such that 5 men of the party of Juan Perez perished. They also had the power of amulets and charms, which in their use would protect the wearer against evil and create him a demon to the enemies. It is stated in the Perez Journal that by the use of such a charm, one priest was able to withstand the shock of the Spanish troopers riding down with full charge with lances. Unaccountably, 2 of the troopers fell dead during the attack. The feathered serpent played a large part in the ritual of Aztec magic.
Unsteadily, old Larimee grabbed the quirt. The flaring match showed him something he had previously overlooked. The serpent on the handle had feathers, feathers which gleamed palely by the light of the moon. The next morning, old Larimee ladled out the hot cakes to the men with an air of grand disdain. It was early, still dark, and the punchers were either too sleepy or too hungry to notice. For once, no one made fast comments on the quality of the food. And when they came back for thirds, old Larimee banged the lid down and began to clear away. There was no argument. The sun cayuse had been manhandled into servility for the day's work. Old Larimee stood around the deserted camp, flicking his scuffed boot with the quirt and admiring the scenery. Oh, how clean and clear it all looked. Funny, but the sky hadn't been as pretty as this to him for 20 years. Not since he was a kid riding range in the Panhandle. The crystal air was better than a jolt of bar whiskey, and the sage smelled like perfume. He sang contentedly as he strolled, and so engrossed was he in the atmosphere that he didn't hear Lee Jacoby come up.
Cookie!
Out of habit, Larimee turned in fright, but his new courage was too strong to be put down.
Well?
Get out the hole and corral and give the boys a hand with the wire. It's been cut in 50 places. We need help. Now get!
Larimee looked coldly at the foreman, flicking his scuffed boot with a quirt. He said,
Since when, Mr. Foreman Jacoby, does a cook mend wire?
Since now!
Well, Mr. Foreman Jacoby, there's your chuck wagon and you know where you can put it. Me, I'm going to town. I'm going to get me a horse and just have some amusement. I'll take $57.29 wages here and now.
Jacoby blinked at the stern face. Suddenly, he yanked out a pad out of his Levi's and wrote a note with a pencil stub. This he threw at the cook. Without further conversation, Jacoby wheeled his bay horse and rode out of the camp. Old Larimee grinned insolently. He gave the quirt a masterful flick.
Miss Williamson, pay bearer 59 in wages. Also send me new cook today. Jacoby at Camp 7.
Larimee cut himself out a mean-eyed sorrel, pulled his saddle gear out of the chuck wagon, and with his worldly possessions on the cantle behind him, rode in great dignity due north across the flat to re-enter Daly Canyon. He'd gone about 3 miles and had just finished contemplating his scene of triumph in great magnification when hoofbeats rolled up the road behind him. The kid drew up beside him on a blowing American saddler.
Gee whiz, Larimee. Gee whiz. You're not walking out. Gee whiz. You're the last man for the old outfit. Come on, Larimee. Please don't do that. You don't know.
Wait, Sonny. If you want to take a ride, come along into town and watch my triumph.
Saying which, old Larimee produced a Colt 44 from thin air, blew a straggling cactus clean out of the ground, puffed the smoke from the barrel, and slid the weapon into its holster again.
Gee. What's up, Larimee?
The old puncher grandly ignored the boy when they rode through the warming day toward Crawford. After a couple of hours, the false fronts and the adobe of the town shimmered into sight through the heat waves. Larimee tied the mean-eyed sorrel horse up to the rail in the front of the bank.
You wait here,
he said, and, bow legs creaking, waddled into the front door of the bank. It was dim and cool in the interior, and it took a moment for old Larimee's ancient eyes to accustom themselves to the gloom. Finally, he saw Williamson beyond the counter at the desk. Without ceremony, old Larimee shoved through the gate, dug the note from his belt, and tossed it on the desk. Williamson was looking at him oddly. The man was bald and fat, and he hid a great deal of craftiness under a large amount of false bluster. He seemed to have no bluster left, however. Without taking his fascinated gaze off of Larimee, he picked up the note. After a little, he distracted himself enough to read the words. His hand shook a trifle, and he got up hurriedly.
Give this man his pay,
said Williamson to the cashier, and then to old Larimee.
Are you leaving town?
Don't reckon I will for a spell.
This seemed to give Williamson a great deal of reason to think. He retreated to his desk and sat there staring at Larimee. The puncher yanked his money to him and stuffed it in his belt. With one last truculent glare at Williamson, he went out into the glaring sunlight and untied his sorrel horse.
What's it all about?
Everything just going fine.
He led his horse down the street to the Oasis Saloon and tied him up again. The kid tagged in after him wondering if Larimee meant to go on a drunk. But Larimee passed straight by the bar and came up before a gambling table. The dealer was amusing himself in the deserted house by betting small sums against his own bank. He had had a good lunch and felt peaceful. He smiled woodenly at Larimee, very glad to have a customer who might, even this early in the day, attract others. Larimee glanced at the picture of the tiger on the wall and then at the 13 spades face up on the layout table.
Like to do some gambling?
Said the dealer, unnecessarily. With a flip, Larimee threw the gold piece on the bar. The dealer swept the double eagle into the till and advanced $20 worth of chips. He shuffled the deck, cut it, and thrust it into the dealing box. Face-up card showing in the deal box with a 10 of diamonds. Unreasonably, since there were only 3 more 10s in that deck, Larimee tossed $5 on the spade on 10 of the layout table. The dealer grinned inwardly, for here he was sure he had a fool whose money would soon be parted. He laid the face-up card aside, his long white fingers sliding in smoothly out of the box. The 6 of hearts came to view, this being the losing card. He slid out and placed beside the box. As it slid, the 10 of clubs came startling into view. The dealer permitted no sign of surprise to escape him. He paid the bet. He kept the case on the board beside him, watching for Larimee to make his next bet. He permitted, again, no sign of amazement, for Larimee let it all ride on the 10 to win. Neatly, the dealer discarded the last winning card and disclosed the 3 of diamonds as the next loser. This he laid beside the box, starting a precise pile. He blinked ever so slightly, for there lay the 10 of spades. There was just a hint of a jerk in his hand as he tumbled out the chips. He kept the case, saw that Larimee had left the whole pile on the layout 10, and with some slight impatience discarded. The next losing card was the 3 of spades, and with a yank which he intended to be triumphant, the dealer pulled it and started to lay it in the neat pile. His hand halted in midair, for the 10 of hearts had been disclosed to full view. Angrily, the dealer thumped the chips down on Larimee's bet, and by now the pile was spilling in both ways. Larimee raked it all in, unsmiling, confident, and laid 4 blue chips before him.
Now I think I'll try aces.
The dealer permitted himself a private grin. He'd get that stack back. No fear of that. And so he put the discard aside, laid out the 9 of clubs as the loser, and then scowled blackly as the ace of diamonds beamed in front of him from the deal box. The chips nearly cracked as he paid the debt.
Letting it ride? Nope. The next winner is gonna be a 2-spot.
And he bet 8 blue chips to prove it.
And if you twist the deck around any, your lungs sure could stand some ventilation.
The dealer discarded, disclosing the jack of spades as the loser, and then slipped this out to find 2 spades lying in full view. The kid understood very little of faro and could care less. He was uneasy at this change in his friend, and besides, this sour smell of the saloon gagged him slightly. He wandered out into the street and watched 2 dogs fighting half-heartedly in the heavy dust of the road. Well, this was so slow that he glanced around for greater amusement and was rooted by the sight of Gus Bolger stepping out of the sidewalk before the bank, with Williamson at his elbow. He knew it was Gus, for he was the smaller of the fraternal twins. The man's face was narrow, his visage dark, his eyes light gray and cold. Everything about him seemed stealthy and shadowed. Gus Bolger turned from the banker and waved covertly to someone across the street. Then, keeping to the wall, Bolger came toward the Oasis Saloon, hand resting on his gun butt. The kid, trusting that he had not been seen, backed hastily into the Oasis and sprinted to the faro layout.
Larimee! Gus Bow's coming in here!
Don't pester me, sonny,
said old Larimee with impatience, for he had just lost his first bet, and though it had been a small one, it bothered him. He was about to place his next bet when the importance of what the kid said came into his brain. He heard a light footfall in the door, and he whirled. Gus Bolger stood, lightly balanced, leaning slightly forward, gun hand tense and still at his side.
You there, at the table. Come outside. I want to talk to you.
Larimee felt his heart start to climb, and then the quirt brushed his leg. He steadied.
If you're so anxious to converse, I reckon this is as good a spot as any.
He was aware of the dealer ducking into cover, and the lone bartender vanishing behind the glasses in the bar.
Come along here. You wouldn't want to make trouble.
I ain't making no trouble, but maybe I'll unmake some. Now say your say, Bolger, or draw, if you ain't too yeller.
The kid was shaking as he moved to one side. He had no gun, and his only friend in the world was about to leave it, for Bolger was known for these things. And the kid's pa, though it was said in Laredo that the break was far from even, had been killed by this very man. Bolger's hand blurred, his left hand stabbed down to fan, but he never connected with his hammer. 3 shots, tight together, and as loud as doom, shook Gus Bolger back. Bolger, dead even as he fell, lurched into the window and fell sideways amid a shower of glass upon the boardwalk. The last piece shook free from the arch, which said Oasis, and fell with one last musical tinkle. With a quick sprint, old Larimee reached the body, gun ready just in case, but this last shot had been high, and there wasn't any reason to suspect from the look of the face that Bolger would terrorize anyone ever again.
Look out!
Larimee dived sideways, and the slug tore splinters from the walk, where an instant before he had stood. Larimee wheeled toward the shot, still falling sideways. Across the street, Winchester raised and sighted, was Ray Bolger, striving insanely to get Larimee in his sights again. But his horse was restive, and shooting from the saddle was not good. Ray Bolger dived out of leather and behind one of the fire barrels, which would lay at intervals on the street. Larimee scrambled under a hitch rail and took cover behind the Oasis watering trough. A slug struck a nail and glanced away with a shrill metallic yowl. With an unsteady hand, Larimee replaced the 3 empties in his .44. He saw the kid hovering in the doorway behind him.
Get out of there!
The kid dived back into the shadows, and another slug broke the remaining window of the Oasis. But the shot had cost Ray Bolger his cover for an instant, and Larimee took a snapshot at the exposed gun barrel and hand. The shot was too tough, and the next moment another bullet yelled away from the trough. A third drove through the corner, and a stream of water jetted out to raise dust as it hit. Larimee gripped the quirt. He looked behind him, and he saw a 3-foot opening under the high boardwalk. Snake fashion, keeping cover with a water trough, he went under the walk, and in its shadow worked his way 10 feet to the left. Anxiously, Bolger was seeking his enemy, exposing part of his face, then his shoulder. Drawing very careful aim, the old cowpuncher sighed and let the hammer fall. The bullet glanced from the side of the water barrel and tore flying splinters away. Blinded and crazed with the pain of his lacerated eyes, Bolger sprang up and took the second shot, instantly following, square in the chest. Larimee cautiously sidled across the street, eyes leery for another attack. He rolled Ray Bolger over with his foot. The man was breathing hoarsely. There was a flurry of action from the front of the bank. A few moments later, Williamson caught up the kid's American saddle horse from the hitch rack, mounted, and started to spur away. Larimee blinked, saw the wild backward glance Williamson gave him, which suddenly made sense. He levered a new cartridge into Bolger's Winchester, very carefully laid his sights. The target was 100 yards off, but traveling straight away. Larimee squeezed the trigger slowly. He thought he saw the banker lurch, but he didn't fall, and the saddler went streaking out of range. The dealer and other citizens came out to cluster around the dead man and the wounded gunman. A doctor came shortly, still in his shirt sleeves, as he had napped after lunch. He shook his head over Ray Bolger, but the man had taken into the Oasis and laid on a pool table. The kid was standing pop-eyed before Larimee. Several citizens stood back at respectful distances and stared. Larimee took a long breath, hit his boot with a quirt, and with something like a swashbuckling air, He went down to the sheriff's office to give himself up. This gesture was not climaxed, for the sheriff was not there, and the deputy, following discreetly, told Larimee in a courteous voice that he didn't have any authority and not having a warrant.
Sheriff, he went out to check some rustling.
He explained the deputy.
And he won't be back for a couple of hours or so. Have a seat, sir.
Larimee sat down in the sheriff's chair, put his spurs amongst the scattered reward posters, and built himself a cigarette. He was grandly unconscious of the citizens who, too late for the shooting, tried to look in indifferent as they strolled by and stared in. Soon, a knot of small boys had to be dispersed by the deputy, who came back heartened.
Sheriff's coming up the road now. Got somebody with him, looks like. If you'll wait just a minute, he'll be right here.
The sheriff dismounted and, thrusting people to one side and the other, gained his office. He'd already been told, only slightly coherent witnesses in the last 10 feet, that he had a big gunman in there waiting to give himself up. Come on in, Lee. Lee Jacoby looked nervous. He glanced at the people trying to make out what was going on, and then, with a cinch on his nerve, started to walk in.
Them Bolgers,
Said a loafer from the livery stable.
was just about the toughest customers we ever had in these parts. I reckon.
Lee Jacoby stopped. He hesitated and began to back away, hand on his gun. Come on, Lee, insisted the sheriff. Why, what the hell? Larimee had just gotten out of the chair at the first mention of Lee. He cat-footed to the door, and there in the glaring daylight saw the foreman backing away.
Stop him!
Cried Larimee, more lights dawning on him.
Stop him, quick!
Sheriff Quayle never moved quicker than the spectators. He stepped to one side in the cleared lane, not knowing which man might be what. The deputy got himself a desk as a bullet backstop.
Drop your gun, or I'll blow you in half.
Lee Jacoby foolishly grunted in belief. He had been expecting at least a U.S. deputy marshal, but Larimee...
Stand where you be, Sheriff. First man makes a move to stop me is a dead one.
He had reached his horse and was about to mount.
Come down or I'll shoot.
The old man never saw Lee Jacoby draw. There was a flame and a smashing blow on Larimee's hip, and another which spun him half around. He fell across the doorway.
Next man that gets that idea gets the same,
Shouted Jacoby and completed the mounting. He started to swing away, smoking gun covering them all, when 3 explosions, almost together, tore at people's nerves. The sheriff ducked back, and when he looked again, Jacoby's horse was running crazily at the boardwalk across the street, and one Lee Jacoby was slowly falling into himself in the dust. The foreman's fallen gun was turning like a small pinwheel in the dirt. After a while, when they'd thrown a blanket over the body, they tried to pick Larimee off the walk, but he was not in a mood to be manhandled.
Come on, get off me! Get off me! It's getting so a man can't even rest without having a whole stampede making a trail of him.
They helped him to his feet and looked for blood, and there was blood. The slug had struck his cartridge belt, exploding 2 bullets, which in their turn had given him flesh wounds in the left armpit. But even so, the bruises made it hard for him to walk.
Sheriff,
Said the doctor.
Ray wants a word with you before he passes. What's this, another one?
It's Bunker Hill Day, said the sheriff grimly. He started to the Oasis Saloon.
No, he's in the Emporium. Said he didn't want to die in a saloon with his boots on. So he's in amongst the dressed goods, if it makes any difference.
The kid helped old Larimee to follow, and they found the dying gunman holding hard to life. At least that what remained in him. All right, Bolger, said the sheriff. What is it?
I got something to say. The old one got laid, didn't he?
Dead center.
I ain't no Sunday school boy, but I got my ideals. Got any fault to find with that?
None.
Well, I'll tell you. I ain't going to hell with murder on my soul. Gus is dead. Lee's dead, and the Sawbones said I won't be long. It was me who done in Tom Gregory, this kid's pa in Laredo. Gus stood him up for a showdown and pretended to draw. I shot for him in an alley.
He brooded for a moment, and then he said,
He never even seen me. It wasn't even because I didn't like him. He was always straight with us. So I got another score to pay off. It's Williamson. Go down and get him because it was him that paid me and Gus to kill Gregory. Get Williamson and hang him for murder because he's killed Gus and Lee and Gregory. And all because he wanted money. Money ain't worth a damn compared to a man's life, is it?
He saw then that they knew he was crying because he wanted to live, and the day was bright.
Get the hell out of here!
Wait a minute, Ray. Wait a minute. You say Williamson did something, but what? Ray Bolger looked at him incredulously.
You mean you wasn't told?
What? What?
Hell, Williamson was the one that hired us to kill Gregory. He put Lee in charge as foreman of the Lazy G, and then he hired us to rustle stock off the Lazy G until he could force us out. Young Gregory would run the stock over the border, but the Mexes took it and sent the pay back by an old Indian. Aztec, he said he was, but I don't savvy too much Spanish. Gus did that. He used a bunch of kids and packed burros as a blind. Came up here to tip us off for the next drive and to bring Williamson the pay they wouldn't trust to us. I don't savvy nothing. But anyway, the old Indian wasn't satisfied with his cut, and he was blackmailing Williamson, so Williamson refused and sent me and Gus out to kill the blabber. But a wagon come down on us, and while we was doing it, we doesn't stay. We thought we hit him, but there wasn't no blood out there this morning, and we couldn't find the Indian.
Bolger looked with agonized eyes at Larimee.
He didn't even tell you?
I don't speak no Spanish.
Oh, my God. Oh, for nothing. Oh.
He began to cough, and Larimee turned away.
Well, kid, you got your spread all set, because what Williamson got paid will be adjudicated to be yourn. And I guess I better get back to my faro game.
Larimee, would you take a job for foreman at 150 a month?
Larimee looked at the kid and smiled.
Sure I would. Glad to. But now I...
Oh, old Aztec, huh?
The proprietor of the Emporium was saying.
Who'd have dreamt it? Why, that fat old geezer and his lardy wife used to come in here every couple of weeks and sell me a lot of cheap trash, like these.
Larimee turned, suddenly interested, and found that the storekeeper was holding up a very interesting item.
Fancy, huh? All the big ranch owners across the border carry 'em. Mark of a big man. $2.50 if you want one as a souvenir. Mr. Larimee. Oh, but I see you've already got one.
Larimee was stricken.
What's the matter?
Pleaded the kid. He was afraid. The deputy came in to find the sheriff.
We got Williamson. He was plugged so bad he fell on a mile east of here, and a puncher brought him in. Hey, what's the matter with you, Mr. Larimee?
But Larimee was past hearing, his eyes resting on a rack of silver-feathered serpent quirts. 50, just like his own, began to glaze. The amulet slipped from his fingers to the floor, and old Larimee, in a dead faint, sagged down on top of it, out cold.